everybody, and thank you for joining me on this video on catching up. So this is if you have fallen behind or you feel you've fallen behind a little bit in your coursework. These are hopefully tips and tricks for helping you to catch up again. So I think the first thing that you need to do is actually assess, have you fallen behind, where you're up to. So in order to do that, you need to do a bit of an audit over the module that you're on. Don't look any further ahead than the exact module you're on at the moment. And see what you've done, make a list of what you've done, a list of what you still have to do, and just be honest with yourself, because there's no point in sort of sugarcoating if in fact you know, you sort of thought you'd nearly finished it, but when you look at it you find actually there's still quite a bit of work to do. So just be really honest and compile those two lists as a very, very first thing that you do. Once you've got your list compiled, I would suggest to you that you send it through to your tutor, so that she can review, and that between you can formulate a way of getting back on track. Maybe that would be setting some dates with your tutor that you can sort of commit to having a particular piece of work or a particular module or whatever into her. Maybe it means sending a photograph of what you've done every week or every couple of weeks. But I think it does help if the two of you can work together and you can actually commit to a way of sort of getting a considered plan in place. I think it's worth mentioning that you probably also need to manage your own expectations at this point. So from a point of view of when you first start the course, then if you can try and reconnect with why you decide to do the course in the first place, that can be very useful. Just remembering that, you know, your ambition was to go on and design knitwear, or your ambition was to go on and you know, sort of work to commission on embroidery pieces or whatever. That can sometimes be the motivating factor why people do actually sort of pick up and then continue. So I think it's really important, if you can, to sort of reconnect with that initial enthusiasm that you had and just question, why did you actually come on board with a course in the first place, and go back and reconnect with that. It is important to, I think, manage your expectations of the course as well, because when you first enrol, then you are as enthusiastic as you're going to be. You know, I've had this great build up to the day that your course materials are coming, they arrive, you make a start, and that's wonderful. And in the normal course of things, you then finish that module, you get feedback, hopefully very good feedback from your tutor, and you go on to the next module with a renewed sense of achievement and a renewed sense of enthusiasm. If for some reason that hasn't happened, you know, something's interrupted, you've not been well, or you work or whatever, then you can actually, that sort of initial sense of enthusiasm has waned, but it hasn't been replaced by the sense of achievement that you have when you get a module in. And I think it's probably a good idea to know that that's the case in advance and be able to manage that. Just knowing it sometimes can be actually really helpful. This is why I feel the way I feel. So I would suggest that you return to the list that you did initially, that has your you know, that what you've actually done to date, what you've still got to do within your current module contained within it, and that you separate that out into a list of jobs that has sort of a love jobs that you really would like to do, and hate jobs that you're not as keen on. Hate's perhaps a strong word, but anyway, hopefully you get the idea. So once you've divided that, try and do a few from sort of mostly from the love list, but a couple from the hate. So mix them up a little bit, so it's not all, it doesn't feel all painful. You know, there are some that you're really looking forward to and anticipating, and I think that makes it a little bit easier. I would also suggest that you divide the jobs down as much as you can into sort of slots of maybe 10 minutes, half an hour, you know, half a day if you can manage to get it. And try to just nibble away, even just if it's just 10 minutes research on your phone on the way into work. You feel like you're actually progressing, and that's helpful. So just try to sort of break them down as much as you can into manageable chunks. I would also suggest to you that you perhaps try to commit to just one evening a week, even if it's just for 2 hours or an hour, because feeling that you're committing to something regularly, even if it's not a huge bunch of time, is a good idea. It makes you feel like you've got things under control. Don't try and rush at it, because if you do try to rush at it, then what often happens is that you can jam or freeze. You know, if you put a whole day, if you said, in order to catch up, I have to have a day this week, and you can't find that day, then panic starts to take over. And the truth is that the way that you catch up is just by doing small amounts frequently and just plugging away at it, rather than, you know, putting this huge pressure on yourself to do a mammoth amount and then unfortunately not being able to carry through. Sometimes we can find with students that they particularly like or dislike one side or the other of their course, so they might, the more normal way around is that they're not as keen on the design, but they really enjoy the making. But we do have students that prefer it the other way around. So try again, just mix that up a little bit for yourself. You know, if you particularly love doing the samples, then even though mainly the design's at the front of the module and the samples are at the end, just try and mix up a little bit for yourself. Say if I do half an hour of design, after that I will go on and I'll do an hour of my knitting or my patchwork or whatever that I really know I'll enjoy. One of my very best tips, and this is from the heart, this is something that I do all the time myself, is when you actually come to the end of a sample or the end of a piece of design or whatever it might be, don't just finish for the evening or finish for the day, put it all away and go, oh, I've finished. Don't do that. If you can, try and put, even if it's only a few minutes at the end of that session, to one side while you still feel enthusiastic, hopefully, and actually start to plan what your next piece of work will be. Because that way, when you come to get your course things out again, it doesn't feel as, I suppose it's getting rid of that blank piece of paper syndrome. It doesn't feel as awkward. You know what you're going to do because you've already had a little plan. Maybe you've sketched a bit of a sample, or maybe you've just gone into your stash and sorted out, you know, some pieces of fabric that you know will be ideal for it. But you have that way in, you have that start, and I personally, that's something I do all the time. And I really, really find that it's valuable, and I hope you will too. Something that we tend to find happens quite a lot is that students will get particularly hung up on one piece of work. You know, they'll, for example, maybe draw and thread work, something that perhaps they're not quite as keen on. That does tend to be quite a Marmite subject. And they will find that difficult, and then their coursework stops because they find that difficult, because they can't get past it, they can't move past it, they feel that they have to do it. So I have a few tips for you over that. I think if you can, just put it to one side, move on to something else, perhaps leave it until the end when you feel you've got the rest of the module finished, and if you just get that done, you'll be able to send it off, and that in itself can be a motivator. You can also decide that, you know, you found it really difficult. It's perhaps not a technique that you'll want to revisit, and you're only going to do a very small sample on it. Now, I don't usually advocate doing tiny samples, but I think sometimes if you're finding it particularly difficult, and it's going to be the thing that's going to make the difference about whether you're going to continue with your coursework or not, then there's a case to be had for just doing a small piece, getting something in and moving on to the next. So those would be my two tips for just trying to move past a piece of work that you find particularly awkward. And finally, I would suggest that you check in with your Facebook group, that you have a look at what everyone else is doing. Firstly, you'll probably get some ideas. I know sometimes it can be a little bit disconcerting to see that other people have moved forward, but do bear in mind it's not a race. You know, everyone we hope will get there in the end, but they will do so at different rates. So check in, see who's finished, have a look at their work, maybe you'll get some inspiration, but also just as you're doing it, spend a few minutes imagining what it feels like. you'll see posts coming up in the group saying, oh, I got my module 2 in today, or I feel brilliant, or I got this nice bit of feedback. That's great. Just imagine what that feels like, because actually sometimes, you know, it can help you get past, get out of what is a bit of a rut, really. So just spend a little bit of time imagining how great that feels when you can actually post into the group and say, yeah, I've completed my first module. I feel brilliant about it. Okay, well, I really hope that those tips and ideas have helped you if you're in that position and you're trying to catch up with the course. Thanks very much indeed for joining me for this video. Bye bye.